Okay, let's dive into something that's honestly been a huge blind spot in medicine. We're talking about vaping and what it actually does to your body when you're trying to recover from surgery.
So, we all know the deal with smoking, right? For years, doctors have been crystal clear. Smoking and surgery are a terrible mix. But what about vaping? I mean, millions of people have made the switch, thinking it's a safer alternative. Is it though? Especially when your body is in full-on healing mode?
This is where things get, well, kind of murky. For all the chatter about vaping being safer, there's been this massive gap in the research, a real blind spot. We just haven't had the solid data on what it does when our bodies are at their most vulnerable, right after a major operation. Yeah, the ads for vapes and e-cigarettes make them seem like this harmless, clean alternative. But is that actually true? What does the science have to say about how well you heal? Well, somebody finally decided to get some real answers.
So, a team of researchers at the renowned Rothman Orthopedic Institute decided to dig in. They knew they couldn't just look at a handful of cases. No, to get a real, undeniable answer, they needed to go big. They needed a mountain of data to find the truth hidden in all the noise. And when I say a mountain, I mean it. They tapped into the TriNex Research Network. Get this. It's a database with the health records of over 250 million patients. That is a staggering amount of information. It's exactly the kind of firepower you need to crack some of medicine's biggest mysteries. And their mission was incredibly specific. They decided to look at one particular, pretty major surgery, ankle fusion, and compare the outcomes. They created two groups, people who used non-tobacco nicotine products, like vapes, and people who were non-smokers. Simple as that. Okay, but here's where the real scientific magic comes in. You can't just throw two groups of people into a spreadsheet and call it a day. To get results that actually mean something, you have to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And that was the big challenge here. At the start, the two groups were, well, they were pretty different. They had different average ages, different health profiles, different BMIs. Any one of those things could totally skew the results and lead you to the wrong conclusion. So how did they fix this? They used this really smart statistical tool called propensity score matching. It's like a high-tech way of finding a perfect twin for each person in the study. You can see how it works. Before, the groups were all over the place. Afterwards, they're virtually identical. It's brilliant. It let them create two perfectly balanced groups for a truly fair fight. And just look at how well it worked. We're talking about two groups, each with over 2,000 patients, where the average age, BMI, and even the rates of diabetes were almost exactly the same. So now, finally, they could ask the question, what really happens after the surgery? All right, let's get to the results, starting with the immediate aftermath. What happened in those first 90 days? Well, the findings were pretty immediate and honestly pretty alarming. Right off the bat, the nicotine users had a 1.6 times higher rate of post-op infections. Their wound complication rate was 1.7 times higher. They were also ending up back in the emergency room more often and were even more likely to be readmitted to the hospital. The negative effects were showing up right away. But the short-term problems were just the beginning. The researchers kept tracking these patients for 2 whole years. And what they found down the line? That's where the most serious issues really surfaced. So the researchers had their eyes on one really critical complication. It's called pseudoarthrosis. And trust me, it's a surgeon's absolute worst nightmare. The name literally means false joint. It's when the bone fusion surgery just fails. The bones don't knit together, they don't heal at all. And here it is, the big one. The nicotine users were 1.52 times more likely to develop this catastrophic complication. Let me just repeat that because it's so important. We're talking about a more than 50% higher risk of your bones completely failing to heal after surgery just from using non-tobacco nicotine. That's huge. And it wasn't just the bone healing. The problems kept stacking up. Vapers had higher rates of the metal implants, the screws and plates, failing. They were more likely to get new fractures around the implant. And they had more infection-related implant failures. It was like a domino effect of complications, all pointing back to nicotine. Okay, so the verdict from the data is pretty clear. But that just leads to the next big question. Why? What is it about nicotine itself, even without all the other stuff in tobacco, that wreaks so much havoc on our ability to heal? Yeah, what's actually going on inside the body? Well, it turns out nicotine launches a multi-pronged attack on the healing process. First off, nicotine is a vasoconstrictor. That means it literally squeezes your blood vessels shut, which starves the healing tissues of the oxygen and nutrients they desperately need. It also slows down your osteoblasts. Those are the critical cells that actually build new bone. On top of that, it messes with your immune response and prevents new blood vessels from growing. It's basically a perfect storm for healing failure. So, what's the big takeaway here? If you've got surgery on the horizon, the advice from doctors is unambiguous. You have to stop all forms of nicotine. I'm talking vapes, patches, gum, the whole shebang. And you need to do it at least 4 weeks before your surgery. And of course, staying nicotine-free while you recover is just as crucial. And the researchers who did this study, they didn't mince words. Their message to surgeons everywhere was loud and clear. You have to talk to your patients about this. These risks are real, and counseling patients to quit nicotine isn't just a suggestion, it's essential for getting the best possible outcome. You know, this study was incredible because it shed light on one specific hidden danger. But it really makes you think, doesn't it? If this is what vaping does in just one type of surgery, what other hidden risks are we just beginning to uncover? What else is still out there, waiting in the shadows?